Islam, Act 6 of our divine constitution and bylaws. With us, all members must proclaim their nationality. And we're teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are part and parcel of this said government, and know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live and the nations of the earth. This is the reason why Allah, the great God of the universe, ordained noble Jew Ali the prophet to redeem his people from their sinful ways. The Moorish Americans are descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. At this time, I'd like to resort and recite the Moorish American prayer, because this is the source from which I draw my strength. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through his holy prophet, Jew Ali. Amen. First off, I'd like to rise to give praise to Allah. I'd like to give praise to Allah because it is Allah who is the Father of the universe, the Father of everything that ever was, is, and evermore to be. I'd like to give honor to Allah's holy and illustrious prophet, noble Jew Ali, who is the founder of our address, the Moorish Science Temple of America. I'd like to give honor to all of those and honor to all of you that have and will aid and assist us in this, our divine and gigantic mission, the uplifting of fallen humanity. Peace. At this time, I'd like to give honor to a few brothers and sisters before I get into my subject matter. The first person I'd like to give honor to is a sister by the name of Tanisha Williams. You know, since being here in Portland, I bought 3 homes. And the last home that I bought, it came through the wisdom of this sister living here in Portland, Oregon, Tanisha Williams. And through this sister, I've gained some wisdom in reference to the concepts and ideologies of the thing that's going on in Portland. Tanisha have a friend, big old brother. And this brother, she showed me before I met him, she said, man, this dude here, you gonna meet, this is a big brother. So this brother, he has a hauling company. And the name of his hauling company is Show2 LL Hauling and Moving. And my opportunity with this brother last week, he was letting me know that there's a time just getting ready to come, as they do so often. They meet with brothers and sisters, and all of them is from Africa, different parts of Africa, and from all over the continent. And they meet once a month. And when they meet once a month, they all come together, talk about concepts and ideology of us as a people. So now I have an invitation. I have an invitation to attend one of these great meetings that our brothers and sisters have, because they're talking about the Atlantic slave trade. And when we begin to talk about the Atlantic slave trade, we have to go back really to 7-Eleven. And when we go back to 7-Eleven, this is when the Moors went into Spain to give Europe civilization. And we stayed in Spain from 7-Eleven to 1492, and in 1492, this is when the last stronghold of the Moors fell in Granada, Spain. I'm going to get in that in a minute, but let me continue. I'd like to give honor to another brother, and his name is Brother David. Brother David lives right here in Portland. He's a firefighter. And when they had the Good in the Hood a few weeks ago, Brother David and them, and some of his brothers that's born outside of the United States, they put some of that food together. That food that we never had here, and they passed it out free in the community. So for that cause, I'd like to give honor also to Brother David and his crew, because they're working at Cason's Meat Market on MLK. And he's opened up his doors to his friends who's doing some mighty things, and they came into his place and fed everybody. Matter of fact, they fixed me a meal too, and I ate, and I'm still full. So I'd like to give honor to all of those brothers and sisters that's doing anything in this community that's uplifting fallen humanity. So if you're looking to get a home, you're looking to purchase a home, this sister, Denisha Williams, is the one that you want to talk to, because this sister is powerful, and she have a lot of science and wisdom in the things that she is doing. The same thing with Brother David, Brother Bocho Gold, and all of these brothers and sisters that's putting work in so you and I can elevate and grow. So I want to get back into my subject matter this evening. And the reason why I wanted to do that, because I was in a meeting 2 days ago. I had to change my lesson up. I was in a meeting the other day. And in this meeting, they was talking about the Jews, the so-called Jews. That was the subject matter that came up. We was talking about the so-called Jews. Now I'm kind of confused, because why are those that they call Jews so-called? You is or you ain't. Because man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And there's no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his mother and father unless his power extend beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. So I'm going to give you some signs. I'm going to give you some signs, something that I learned 50 years ago. I learned it because I met a brother that knew a brother that knew about nationality and divine creed. And this evening, I'm going to share some of this with you. We have a book. And Noble Ali gave us this book and told all of the brothers and sisters to read this book. And the first chapter in this book was talking about some brothers and sisters. They was talking about Mary. They was talking about Joseph. They was talking about King James. They was talking about Boaz. They was talking about Ruth. Now we know who Ruth is. Everybody know who Ruth is. And really why I like to talk about Ruth so much is because my cousin is getting ready to turn 100 years old in a few weeks. And her name is Ruth. But the reason why I mentioned Ruth is because when in this meeting a few days ago, it was told to me that when you hear brothers talk about Jesus, when you hear brothers talking about Zacharias, when you hear brothers talking about Elizabeth, or when you hear brothers and sisters talking about anybody that's in line with what they known as the Holy Bible, they said we done took on some names. We done took on some concepts. We done took on some ideologies. But when I'm looking now, and they talking about Mary, and when they talking about Mary, Mary had a mother. And Mary's mother's name was Anna. I never heard that when I was in the church. When I went to the church, and I got a aunt that had a church, my mother stayed in the church, my family, but when they taught me in the church, they never told me anything about a sister named Anna. And I really like this sister named Anna because it reminds me of my elders. Because Anna was the one that set the pattern for Ruth. She gave Ruth the signs. She gave Ruth the signs that she gave Jesus. her son. Because Jesus had a wife. And when you talk about Mary and Joseph, you were talking about brothers and sisters that was a part of the Essene brotherhood. The Essene brotherhood was a brotherhood of those that was connected with God. So now we're talking about Mary, we're talking about Joaquin, we're talking about Boaz. And the reason why I brought up them names because those are the two pillars. Joaquin and Boaz are the two pillars that our brothers and sisters use as a pattern. Because the book says man need a pattern for their life. They love to follow and not to lead. And the man who stands upon the corners of the path and points the way but does not go is just a pointer, and a block of wood can do the same. So now we're talking about Joaquin and we're talking about Boaz. We're talking about two pillars. And let's look at Joaquin again. Because Joaquin was the husband of Mary's mother. Joaquin was the grandfather of Jesus. Now we say Joaquin and Boaz. Now who is Boaz? Now in our book it said Boaz by Ruth and Joseph by Mary. So what I'm saying today is we need to start looking at our history, looking at our culture. Because when they say the so-called Jews, there's no such thing. You is or you ain't. And when you begin to talk about the Jews stole your birthright. They stole your birthright. Now they got you calling yourself Negro, colored, and black. And I want to say this again because I'm in my 70s. I'm an old timer. And I said on this last show here that when I first went to elementary school, we couldn't use no word but Negro. And that's what I am. I was a Negro then, and I'm a Negro now. My man Bruce just left here, and he was talking about black. But see, before you was black, you was a Negro. Because Negro is a name given to a river in West Africa by Moors because it contained black water. So we was Negro. Now, that word Negro has died. So we no longer are Negroes. That's why Drew Ali say Negro, colored, and black. And these names that were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. So now I'm still in elementary school. Because see, when they first told me that I was Negro, I was 5 years old. I went to school, John F. Cook School in Washington, D.C., and when I went to class, my teacher told me that I was a Negro. And then came a word, colored. And the book tells me that color is anything that has been painted, stained, varnished, or dyed. Now let me tell you something about color. There was a friend of mine, not a brother. I was talking to a brother, Theodus Kaysen. And his family went to Atlanta, Georgia to a family reunion. And when they was in Georgia at a family reunion, I thought of him because he was telling me about his grandson and how his grandson got the opportunity to go to look at Martin Luther King's family mansion. And that was a blessing for those children to see. But you know what? Martin Luther King, when he got so powerful, they killed him. They killed him because he started calling himself colored. Now we know that there's something known as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So now they killed him. They killed him because he was telling the people they were Negro, no color. But he told them that they was black. And we know that black, according to science, means death. So first you Negro, then you colored. But once they kill Martin Luther King, then you become black. So now, we as a people, some of you say I'm Negro, some of you say I'm colored, some of you say that I'm black. But we all know that these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. So we're talking about history now. We're talking about names, we're talking about dates, and we're talking about history. And when you begin to talk about the slave trade, you got to go back to 711 to 1492. Because whenever somebody talking in this era of time about the slave trade, you cannot be talking about nobody but the Moors. Because the Moors was involved in the slave trade. First we was Moors, because when we went into Spain, we was Moors. But now we Negro, black, and colored. So this is an issue that's on the table. Everybody is talking about reparation. We can't deal with reparation. You can't go to this government because ministers and brothers and sisters from all across the country talking about we going to court. And we go on to court and we're going to talk about reparation. But we will say that they got to give us reparation because we Negroes, we colored, and we black. But man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And there's no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his mother and father unless his power stem beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. So now we want to talk about going to the government about reparation. Who wants to go to the government about reparation? You and me can't go. I just told you I was Negro. And Negro is a name given to a river in West Africa by Moors because it contained black water. I can't go to the government and talk about reparation because I'm colored. Colored is anything that has been painted, stained, varnished, or dyed. And I can't go to the government about reparation because I'm calling myself black. And black, according to science, means death. The only black flag I know is the one that killed roaches. So now we discombobulated. We, as a people, is discombobulated. We don't know who our forefathers were. Sister was telling me the other day that she got brothers, she got sisters, and all of them is Blackfoot, and they this, and they done switched up so much. And that's what we're doing as a people today. Most of the brothers I know, most of the sisters I know, they married somebody else. They married somebody that's not of the same nationality that they are because they feel anyway inferior. Because most of my friends today, we feel inferior because the women that we have, they don't look like us, they don't talk like us, they don't sound like us, and they have a wisdom that we don't have. So now we're talking about the slave trade again. Let's look at the slave trade again. Do your researching because man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. Look at your history and see who. Now we got a lot of brothers, and most of them is college professors. And these college professors is talking about the Moors. And in their conversations about the Moors, he said, man, I agree with you. He said, where are they at today though? He said, I agree that we was Moors. I agree that we're in Negro, colored, and black. But where are the Moors today? Truth don't change. If there was a Moor yesterday, there's a Moor today. And I guarantee you that most of us have different mindsets now because it was taken away from you and me. They don't want to tell you about who you are because if they tell you who you are and who your forefathers were, then they got to be reparation. And the only way that we can get reparation is go back to who your forefathers were. That's why in the Moorish Science Temple of America right now, when Noble Drew Ali founded it, and when he taught these lessons to us, This is a Quran I had. I had this Quran, man, so long. I got it from J. Fraser Bey, the Grand Mufti. And he gave me this book, man. I had it for so long, and I can't throw it away because of him. You know, but when you begin to study the lessons of your forefathers, you got to look at Negro. You got to look at color. You got to look at black. You got to look at Ethiopian, because Ethiopia means something divided. And you have to look at these things because Allah sent Noble Jew Ali to redeem you and me from our sinful ways. Because it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the name and principles that delude to slavery. I just talked to a friend of mine. He's working here at the studio. He said that he's on his way to Vietnam. He's going to Vietnam to visit his family. And I was honored because the show that we had before that with Bruce Pichard, we both talk about Vietnam. And the reason why we talk about Vietnam, because we was there. We was there in that era of time. I was a combat medic. I picked a lot of brothers up. I picked a lot of Europeans up, and a lot of them is at home right now with their family. But the biggest issue for those of African descent is nationality. Everybody have a nationality except you and me. Friends of mine that I'm close to from one perspective, because from another perspective, we don't have nothing in common. You done took on the concept, you done took on the ideologies, you done took on a name that has nothing to do with you and me. We're talking about the slave trade. Let's look at the slave trade again. What is your nationality? I'm a black American. Black, according to science, means death. What is your nationality? My nationality is I'm a Negro. I'm colored. I'm black. But that is not the issue of today. Because over there in California, they got a bill out, and all these people supposed to be applying for reparation. Everywhere they go, they say that they're going to get some money. They're going to give you $1,000. They'll give you a few things. But if they gave reparation to those of African descent, I say those of African descent because we got to look at the slave trade. There's a big picture. There's a big picture here. Let's look at the 15th century. If the slave trade was 711 to 1492, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 15th century. What took place in the 15th century? What took place? The slave trade? The Roman Empire took over? Look at it. Queen Isabella, who's gone, Ferdinand, they're gone. Look at it. Because this is the time that they switched the records, changed the records, made you one thing and made somebody else another. And right now, we as a people are suffering. But it ain't the European's job anymore. He done his job. It's our job. Because when we begin to talk about the Moors, everybody want to talk about the Moors. But when Noble Jew Ali was on the scene, he said one prophet, one temple, and one nation. So if you say that you're a Moorish American and you follow the prophet Noble Jew Ali, then there's one prophet, one temple, and one nation. Because man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And there's no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his mother and father unless his power extends beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. So we got work to do. We have a lot of work to do. We have work to do because it's important. It's incumbent on you and me that we have to teach these lessons to our children. It ain't about nobody else. It's about the baby. And if it's about the babies, you are who your forefathers were. Man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And there's no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his mother and father unless his power extends beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. Now let's get back to Jesus. I'm going to show you something in our questionnaire. It said, where do we get the name Jesus? And it said, from the east. It said, what do the name Jesus mean? It said, Jesus means justice. Now look at verse 27. This is a lesson that I teach every day. It said, will you give in brief the line genealogy through which Jesus came? And it says, some of the great fathers through which Jesus came are Abraham. Now you know Abraham was not always Abraham. He first was Abram, and then he became Abraham. He became Abraham when he found spirit in the eyes of God. So we got some of the great fathers through which Jesus came are Abraham, Boaz by Ruth. Now we know about this Boaz by Ruth then, because when you talk about Boaz, you're talking about Jacqueline. When you talk about Boaz, you're talking about King David. You're talking about Solomon. You're talking about Ruth's husband. You're talking about all of these are they who is part of your genealogy. Taken away from you, giving it to somebody else. Because through the advent of slavery, everything that was given to you by the great God Allah has been taken away. So it say Boaz by Ruth. It say Jesse. There you go again. Jesse. King David. Solomon. So now if we're talking about Jesse, if we're talking about King David, and if we're talking about Solomon, who we have to go back to? We have to go back to the book of Ruth. We have to go back to the slave trade. Because Ruth married Boaz. Let me reiterate that. Sister Ruth, you're going to have a birthday in a couple of days. She married Boaz. But from that union, we built the house of David. The house of David. I am a part of the house of David. Now, when you begin to talk about David, when you begin to talk about Goliath, when you begin to talk about Ruth, see, let me tell you something. And I had to learn this lesson a long time. You know, we begin to call ourselves many different names. But you can't negate the fact that when we first went into Spain, we stayed there for 700 some years. We weren't there just 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4. We was there 700 some years. We went into Spain because we wanted to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. We wanted to bring Europe out of those cages. And we wanted to teach Europe about the higher self. Because in all the world, there are but two things. There's a higher self and there's a lower self. The higher self is human spirit, clothed with soul, made in the form of Allah. The lower self, the carnal self, is the body of desires, is a reflection of higher self, distorted by the murky ethers of the flesh. So now we're talking about the higher self. We're talking about the higher self because it's the mother of virtues. And let's look at this again. In all the world, there are but two things. And you can only be one of them. You can't be both of them. You have to be your higher self or you have to be your lower self. Man cannot serve two masters at the same time. He has to love one and despise the other. Now, the only way you can love one, you're going to have to love him out of your higher self. The higher self is the mother of virtues and the harmonies of life that breathes justice, mercy, love, and right. The lower self, the carnal self, the body of desires is a reflection of the higher self distorted by the murky ethers of the flesh. So now we're getting lessons. They're telling you that ain't but one. So you got the higher self and the lower self. See, at one time the whole world was called Asia. A lot of us don't know that. That's why you see a lot of Chinese. They say that they are Asian, you know, but they say that they're Chinese, but of what descent? Chinese descent? That's African descent. Everything come from Africa, even the slave trade. So now, my point is this. We say that the higher self and the lower self, human spirit clothed with form, made in the form of Allah. When your mother taught you, she taught you your ABCs. She taught you how to read and write. She told you who you was and who your forefathers were. She told you about your higher self, and she taught you about your lower self. That's what Noble Drew Ali did. He told us that we had two selves. He said we got to get one on the side over there and the other one right here. So now the two selves, what is the mother virtue? The mother of virtues and the harmonies of life. We talking about the mother of virtue, but it breeds justice, mercy, love, and mercy. Can the higher self pass away? No. Why? Because it is a law in man. Can the lower self pass away? What does the lower self breed? The lower self breeds hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harm. You know, most of my friends that was in the Moorish Science Temple of America, they're going back to the church now, or they're going to the Sunni community. They're going to one of those other communities, because what we're talking about over here, we're talking about nationality. We're talking about redeeming you of your sinful ways and to warn you of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. But if you begin to go and do things that's diametrically opposed to what Allah sent Noble Drew Ali to tell us, then you're a part of that people over there that's in disguise, all powerful, yet full of jealousy, hate, and lust. These are gods, but gods are but demons in disguise. See, we don't have a two selves. Your higher self and your lower self. Which one is you? Which one is your good self? There's a good self and there's a bad self. Noble Drew Ali came, and he came and brought us our good self. He told us that we have to crush one under our feet and chain the other to that purpose. And for what purpose was the Moorish Science Temple of America founded? For the uplifting of fallen humanity. And how did the prophet begin to uplift the Moorish Americans? By teaching them to be themselves. So we don't look at this as being bad. If we call ourselves Negro, if we call ourselves colored, if we call ourselves black, then we can accept that. We can accept it because these names was given to slaves by slaveholders. Why would the slaveholder give you a name of Negro, colored, and black? Where did we get the name Negro from? Drew Ali told us Negro is a name given to a river. Now he gave us a name that was given to a river in West Africa, and because it contained black water. Now you gave me a name that contained black water. You gave me a name, colored, that contained black water. You gave me another name, black, which contained black water. You gave me another name, Ethiopia, which means something divided, which contained black water. So we need to go back to school. We need to start looking at the things that Allah sent you and me to look at. Because once you do that, then we can go address these issues that we have. There's some supreme issues. It's a supreme issue that must be recognized. That's what Drew Ali said. He's telling us about a supreme issue. And one of the supreme issues is you keep calling yourself black. You accepted that. You haven't even investigated it. You need to investigate what transpired during the Atlantic slave trade. You need to look at that. I was telling my friend, the one that's from Africa, the other day. We keep talking about the slave trade, and my godson, my son-in-law, I have two of them. Both of my son-in-laws are from Nigeria. But when we begin to talk about Nigeria, you have to go back again to 7/11 to 1492. Because when you look at those that's from Ghana, Nigeria, and all those Western African nations all the Moors. There was Moorish then, and they're Moorish now. And when you say that you from Senegal, or you from Morocco, or you from wherever, study your history. It was on the news the other day that most of all Europeans, if you ask them where they come from, they could tell you and can trace themselves back, so you'll see. If they ask me, or if they ask somebody where I'm from, I'm black, and I'm from Africa, and I'm colored. But these are things that we have to understand before we leave this earth. We have to set these things up for our babies that's coming behind us. I have a granddaughter, a couple of years old, just was born. Her father, a doctor from Nigeria. But once he began to see the other part of his history, same thing my other guys, they'll find out that they are from Nigeria. But before Nigeria, they was a part of the slave trade. See, all of us of African descent was part of the slave trade. And when you talk about the slave trade, you got to talk about it. Because we're going back to 1492 and the foundation. Let's go back to the 15th century. The foundation of Christianity beginning in Rome. The Roman nations founded the first church, of whom crucified Jesus of Nazareth, for seeking to redeem his people from under the Roman yoke and law. And Jesus himself was of the true blood of the ancient Canaanites and Moabites, and the head of that, seeking to redeem his people in those days from the pressure of the pale-skinned nations of Europe. Rome crucified him according to their law. Now they took my Jesus. They buried my Jesus in Vatican Square. And when they buried my Jesus in Vatican Square, they took on my name. Now they got Jesus looking like Negro. They got Jesus looking like he's colored. They got Jesus looking like he's black. Now, the new thing that's going on in the universe, all of the brothers and all other brothers, they marry European women because they know that the Europeans look better than us sisters that we got because they dark skinned and looking crazy. So all the brothers marrying European women now. And you know what they're doing when they're marrying European women? They're doing things that Moors went into Spain to tell the people to stop doing. This is why we went into Spain, because we were talking about the slave trade. We were talking about giving Europe civilization, bringing them out of the dark ages, telling them how to learn to love instead of hate, telling them that you don't do so. When I was a child, a little boy, my mother, because you got to understand, she born 1910. My father was 12 years older than her. He born 1898. They gave me instructions. And the instructions they gave me, they told me certain things you just don't do. Now, ain't nothing wrong with the European doing it, because you can't say nothing about that because that ain't none of your business. But they telling us of African descent. Just like when I went to school. See, I'm in my 70s. Just like when I went to school, certain things brothers wouldn't do. Right then, but now they're doing everything now. They all right with that now. They're doing it all. I've talked to a sister up there. She said, man, I don't do that because she said she's a Blackfoot Indian. And she said, we was taught certain things you do and certain things that you don't do. So now we're in the scriptures again. I'm getting ready to teach in this lesson here in Portland, Oregon about this Last Supper. I mentioned it the other day, earlier today, with Bruce Picard, we were talking about the Last Supper. And when you're talking about the Last Supper, you're talking about food for thought. So we're going to start eating and we're going to feed you some food for thought. We're getting ready to tell you about your higher self. See, there's a higher self and the lower self. And the higher self is human spirit. We're talking about the human spirit. See, they got different kind of spirits. You got a divine spirit and you have a carnal spirit. And carnal men want not the light. They love the dark. And when the light shines in the dark, they comprehend it not. But the book say, we call these sons revealers of the light. But you must have the light before you could receive the light. And now we're talking about having the light so we could receive the light. And these are they who set your souls on fire with love and holy zeal, making you conscious of your mission to the sons of men. So now what is our mission? For what purpose was the Moorish Science Temple of America founded? For the uplifting of fallen humanity. And how did the prophet begin to uplift the Moorish Americans? By teaching them to be themselves. Who are you? You're Asiatic Muslim. Why are we Asiatic Muslim? Because they are but two formulations, Asiatic and European. And I'm sure not European, and I'm a Muslim because I submit my will to Allah. Now, how do you submit your will to Allah? You submit your will to Allah by living just 5 principles. And those 5 principles that you have to live is love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. We love our brothers and sisters, and we tell them the truth. That they live in peace, have freedom, and justice will come to us all. So we got to go back to the slave trade. We got to go back to 1492. We got to go back to the Portuguese. We got to go back to the Dutch. We have to go back to the French. And we have to study these things and teach them in Sunday school. That's why the books say, out from your Sunday school come the guiders of the nation. And you can't be a guider of the nation unless you go to your Sunday school. This is why Noble Drew Ali tells us about Sunday school. He tells us about study group. He tells us about holy day, because man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And there is no one who is able to change man from the decent nature of his mother and father unless his power extend beyond the great universal creator, Allah himself. Talking to a friend of mine, one of my Moorish brothers. We've been in the temple 50 years ago, a long time. And in our conversation, we were talking about our biological friends because he's older than me. But all of my friends, they call themselves black. They call themselves black because they're separating themselves from the human family. If you call yourself black, then you have no rights that a citizen is bound to respect. Now we're talking about citizens, because Drew Ali say the citizens of all free national governments, according to the national constitution, are all of one family bearing one free national name. Those who fail to recognize the free national name of the constitutional government are classed as undesirables and is subject to all inferior names, abuses, and mistreatments that the citizens care to bestow upon them. And it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the name and principles that delude to slavery. He said names and principles that delude to slavery. What principles? Because we do have principles too. Drew Ali gave us principles. He gave us 5 principles too. And the 5 principles that he gave us is for our growth and our development. So we need to look at this again because we have some issues. There's but one supreme issue to use with that which is law, and we have some supreme issues. All of these different temples that you find out that's in, matter of fact, they got some temples, they got 4 or 5 different prophets. They have different names. They have different spellings. But ain't but one. All that other stuff, you got to put it behind you because we have a subject matter that's at hand that we need to talk about in reference to our children. And that is nationality and divine creed. Now, when you begin to talk about nationality you're talking about human identification. And when you're talking about divine creed, you're talking about your principles. You're talking about the principles that Noble Drew Ali brought us and told us to live by. And these principles that Noble Drew Ali brought us, again, is the highest principles known to man. You love your brothers and sisters. You tell them the truth. That they live in peace, have freedom, and justice will come to us all. And it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the name and principles that allude to slavery. So now we're talking about the slave trade. A lot of people don't want to talk about it no more because they say it happened 100 years ago. But when you begin to study history, not history, but history, when you begin to talk about history, we see that there is but one supreme issue that we need to deal with to redeem us from that which was lost. And it comes through the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. So now I got friends. I have a friend that's a Chinese. And my Chinese friend, I just talked about him the other week because he was in controversy with his own family because they were saying that the Chinese really can't claim nothing. They have to go back to their forefathers. They have to go back to their forefathers, and I got it on tape. They saying, the Chinese people saying when they checked their records out, they came from the Moors. Everybody came from the Moors, but we know that. This ain't something big that we're talking about. We're just talking about human identification. We're talking about nationality. We're talking about worshiping under our own vine and fig tree. And if you don't worship under your own vine and fig tree, then you're worshiping under somebody else's. But like I say, in 7-11, you know, I was thinking about another brother. When I think about brothers, when you go back in history, I think about going back to 2 BC, 3 BC, looking in Egypt and looking everywhere. And when Europe was in the Dark Ages, Europe was in the Dark Ages, and the Moors went into Spain. When I say Moor, I'm talking about myself. I can't get around it. And we have to look at this because we are so blind that we ain't gonna look at none of that because you ain't who you say you are. Or you don't want to be who you say you are because a man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. Now, who was his forefathers yesterday? The founder of civilization, the cradle of civilization. We're talking about our forefathers. We're talking about your father, and we're talking about my father. So I'm always honored to be able to come before my Portland listening audience, especially those of African descent, because I'm trying to give you something. I'm trying to give you something that you ain't never knew that really in existence. And if you call yourself Negro, if you call yourself colored, if you call yourself black, even if you call yourself white, it's a sin. It's a sin if you call yourself white because then you're German, you're Dutch, you're French, you're Portuguese, you're Dutch. But there's no such thing as a white man. And the only white flag I know, they call it black, is the one that kills roaches. See? So I like to give honor to Prophet Noble Drew Ali because he was sent by the great God Allah to redeem you and me from our sinful ways. Noble Drew Ali did something that we thought you would never hear. He came to this earth telling us that we were Negro, black, and colored. And I went on the Moorish home. We have a Moorish home number 1 in Prince George, Virginia. And I went on the colony. We had a meeting down there, you know, with a lot of elders. And these elders was around with Noble Drew Ali. So when we was in the meeting and I was running my mouth, she got to crying. elder sister. She was the grand governess of the colony. And Paige Hill was sitting right there with me. We were sitting there right there inside the big meetings. And she said, you know what, brother? She said, if they would have had brothers around like you, when the prophet Noble Drew Ali was on the scene, they would not have been able to get him. So they got our prophet. They got our prophet because he was telling us that we were not Negroes, colored, and black. He said because these names was given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. He said, but this is a new era of time now. And all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live and the nations of the earth. I got a brother that's right here in Portland, Oregon with me. Sometimes he want to be Moorish, sometimes he don't. Sometimes, and I can understand, because if you have to live according to the principles of Noble Drew Ali, you can go over there with Europeans anyway and do something else. Because Drew Ali brought us a methodology that was conducive to our growth and development. He gave us some principles and told us to live by these principles. And then you're entitled to the name of faithful. So we talking about faithful now. Faithfulness unto death. And when you begin to say that you are faithful, that means that you're living a moral and clean life. In order to live a moral and clean life, you have to have some principles. You have to have some principles in your life. You have to put on one of these fez that I have on too. Because my fez that I have on, Drew Ali gave it to us. He gave it to us and he gave it back to us because somebody took it. Somebody took my forefathers. They buried them in Vatican Square. You done took my signs and you done took my symbols. And now you got me doing some things that I know that's diametrically opposed to what God say. Because God said don't do that. He said just learn to love instead of hate. And in order for one to love, you first must love yourself. Don't tell me that you love God and you doing what God say, but you first got to work on yourself. That's what we doing right now. We working on ourselves. We trying to be a better person. We're not trying to be the same person that we were yesterday. Whatever I was yesterday, I'm growing out of it and I'm elevating out of it. So that's what we got to look at now. We have to look at what purpose of the Moorish Zion Temple of what was Moorish Zion Temple of America founded? Why was it founded? For the uplifting of fallen humanity, and it was founded to teach you and me to be ourselves. Now what self is it teaching you and me to be? What self? Because you got two selves. What self did Noble Drew Ali come and tell us to be? But guess what Drew Ali did? When Drew Ali came, he gave us, he gave us Boaz, he gave us Ruth, he gave us Joseph, he gave us King David, he gave us Mary, he gave us Anna, he gave us Joachim, and these are they who are your forefathers and mine. And these are they who told us the man today is what his forefathers were yesterday. And what was your fathers yesterday? They was Moors. They was Muslims. They was spirit. It said man is not the body nor the soul. He is the spirit and a part of Allah. A lot of brothers and sisters is passing on now. They're passing on and they're going on to another plane. But what brothers and sisters fail to realize that somebody is still here that the spirit is working on. God is working in your life. God is working in my life. And there's certain things that we have to do to carry it to another plane. What I mean by that when I say God is working in our life. See, when Allah sent Noble Drew Ali to this earth to redeem us from our sinful ways and to warn us of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth, there are certain brothers and there are sisters that's here, still here today. They might be younger, but they have elevated. They have grown. And a lot of them took us to another level because I'm telling you, he said he's going to make the government, the European, enforce his law. I might don't see it. You might don't see it. But this is what the book tells us. Drew Ali said he's going to make the European enforce his law. And if they enforce the law, what law is they enforcing? They're enforcing nationality and divine creed. Nationality is the nation that drew all the tide. So we got two of them. We have nationality and we have divine creed. We have two pillars. We resting upon two pillars. And these two pillars that we're resting upon is nationality and divine creed. You got to teach nationality and you got to teach divine creed. When you teach nationality, you tell the people who they are, who their forefathers were. They're not Negro, colored, and black. Because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. So we got to look at this because we have a lesson. Even though things transpired during the advent of slavery, it's still working. It's working harder every day. And a lot of us think we're getting further away, but we're getting close to. Because I'm looking at myself, and as I unfold, as does the bud unfold, to show the flower, that means that I'm coming closer to my Father, God Allah. And I live closer to my Father, God Allah. Let me tell you something that I heard. I heard it yesterday when we was in the meeting, and I got it from my mother. And she taught me this, and I want to give it to you as a blessing. Because most of those of African descent know this because your mother taught it to you. And she said that the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff that comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemy. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. At this time, I recite the Moorish American prayer, the source from which we draw our strength. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation by night and by day through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.